Riding. The rain came down in cold sheets over the Wyoming plains, turning the dirt roads into muddy trails and covering the small town of Red Creek in a gray veil. Most people hurried from one place to another, eager to escape the weather. Wagons rolled quickly through the streets, and shopkeepers closed their doors against the wind. No one paid much attention to the young woman sitting beside the general store. Sarah Collins sat curled against the wooden wall, her arms wrapped around herself. Her clothes were soaked. A bruise darkened one side of her face. Another marked her jaw. Her lip was split, and every movement sent pain through her body. She was only 24 years old, yet exhaustion made her look much older. The townspeople who noticed her assumed she was a drifter or someone who had fallen on hard times. They glanced her way and continued walking. Some felt sorry for her. Others simply didn't want to get involved. Sarah didn't blame them. For years she had learned that suffering was something people preferred not to see. Her mother had died when Sarah was 16. Afterward, her stepfather Walter became the only authority in the house. At first, his cruelty came in the form of insults and threats. Then came the slaps. Later came the punches. Every year grew worse than the one before. He controlled everything: where she went, who she spoke to, how much food she ate, and whether she was allowed to leave the property. Whenever Sarah talked about escaping, Walter laughed. "You've got nowhere to go," he would say. Eventually she started believing him. The night before had been the worst of all. Walter had returned home drunk and angry. Sarah never knew what caused his rages. Sometimes it was a bad day. Sometimes it was nothing at all. This time he accused her of disrespecting him. Before she could explain, he struck her. The beating seemed endless. When it was over, Sarah lay on the floor barely able to breathe. Walter staggered off to bed, leaving her alone in the darkness. Something changed inside her that night. Perhaps it was the realization that if she stayed, she might not survive another year. Perhaps it was the memory of her mother's voice telling her she deserved better. Whatever it was, Sarah found the courage she thought she had lost. Before dawn, she slipped out of the house. She took no suitcase, no money, no belongings, only hope. Hours later she reached Red Creek. The journey had drained what little strength remained. Now she sat in the rain wondering what would happen next. She had escaped. But escape wasn't the same as freedom. She had nowhere to go. No family, no friends, no future she could see. Tears mixed with the rain on her cheeks. She lowered her head and prepared herself for another long day. Then she heard hoofbeats. A horse stopped nearby. Sarah barely looked up. She expected another stranger who would pass without a second glance. Instead, a calm voice spoke. "Miss, are you all right?" She looked up. A tall cowboy stood beside a chestnut horse. His broad shoulders filled a weathered ranch coat, and concern showed plainly in his eyes. His name was Ethan Walker. At 38 years old, Ethan owned one of the largest ranches in the county. He was respected not because he was wealthy but because he treated everyone fairly. Sarah tried to look away. "I'm fine." The lie sounded weak. Ethan crouched beside her. "No, you're not." She swallowed hard. Most people looked at her injuries and looked away. This man looked directly at her. Not with pity. Not with judgment, with concern. The kindness in his eyes shattered the fragile wall she had built around her emotions. Tears began flowing uncontrollably. She covered her face. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "You don't need to apologize." For several moments, she simply cried while Ethan remained beside her. He didn't rush her. He didn't pressure her. He just stayed. Eventually Sarah tried to stand. The moment she rose, pain shot through her legs. She stumbled forward. Before she hit the ground, Ethan caught her. Her knees buckled completely. She could no longer support her own weight. Without hesitation, Ethan lifted her into his arms. Sarah froze. No one had carried her since she was a child. For years every touch she received had brought fear. This felt different, safe, gentle. Unexpectedly, she found herself fighting back fresh tears. Ethan carried her through the rain toward the town doctor's office. The doctor immediately began examining her injuries. As the examination continued, his expression grew darker. Bruised ribs, malnutrition, old fractures that had healed poorly, scars that spoke of years of abuse. When Sarah finally admitted what had happened, the room fell silent. The doctor looked at Ethan. Neither man needed to speak. The truth was obvious. Sarah had endured far more than anyone should. Several hours later the doctor completed his treatment. "You need rest," he said firmly. "A lot of it." Sarah nodded. Then reality returned. "Where am I supposed to go?" The question hung in the air. She had no answer. The doctor didn't either. The local boarding house was full. There were no nearby relatives. No shelters. No resources. Ethan stood quietly for a moment before speaking. "You can stay at my ranch." Sarah stared at him. "What? You need somewhere safe. I can't impose on you." "You aren't." She shook her head. "You don't even know me." Ethan smiled slightly. "I know enough." For the first time in years, Sarah felt something unfamiliar. Hope. The ride to Ethan's ranch took nearly an hour. The rain eventually stopped, revealing rolling green hills stretching beneath clearing skies. Sarah sat carefully in the wagon, watching the landscape pass by. Everything felt unreal, like a dream she might wake from at any moment. Then the ranch appeared. Wide pastures spread across the valley. Hundreds of cattle grazed peacefully. A large farmhouse stood near several barns. It was beautiful. Ethan helped her down from the wagon. An older woman emerged from the house. Her name was Martha. She had worked for Ethan's family for decades and managed the household. The moment she saw Sarah's condition, her face softened. "Oh, sweetheart." The words alone nearly made Sarah cry. No one had spoken to her that gently in years. Martha guided her inside. A hot meal waited on the table. Fresh bread, soup, roasted vegetables. Sarah stared at the food. Walter often withheld meals as punishment. Some days she survived on scraps. Now a feast sat before her. When she hesitated, Martha smiled. "Eat." Sarah obeyed. The first bite nearly brought tears to her eyes. That evening Martha prepared a guest room. The bed looked impossibly soft. As Sarah lay beneath warm blankets, she waited for the familiar sounds of anger and violence. None came. The ranch remained peaceful. For the first time in years, she slept without fear. The following weeks passed slowly. Her body began healing. The bruises faded. Her strength gradually returned. Yet emotional scars remained. Sudden noises still frightened her. Raised voices made her flinch. She often expected disaster around every corner. Ethan never pressured her to recover faster. Instead, he offered patience. Each morning he greeted her kindly. Each evening he asked how she was feeling. Nothing more, nothing less. The consistency mattered. For years Sarah had lived in chaos. Now she lived among people she could trust. One afternoon Ethan found her standing beside the horse pasture. The animals grazed peacefully beyond the fence. "They seem to like you," he said. Sarah smiled. "They're beautiful." "You ever ridden?" She shook her head. "No." "You want to learn?" Her eyes widened. "Really?" "Sure." The next morning Ethan introduced her to a gentle mare named Daisy. Sarah felt nervous. The horse seemed enormous. But Ethan remained patient. He showed her how to approach calmly. How to hold the reins. How to sit properly. The first lesson lasted only 20 minutes. The second lasted longer. Within weeks Sarah was riding comfortably across open fields. The experience transformed her. Every ride gave her confidence. Every mile reminded her she was stronger than she believed. Months passed. Autumn painted the hills gold and amber. Sarah became part of ranch life. She helped Martha prepare meals. She organized supply inventories. She assisted with bookkeeping and correspondence. The ranch workers respected her. Many considered her family. For perhaps the first time in her life, Sarah felt useful. Valued. Loved. One evening she sat on the porch watching the sunset. Ethan joined her. The sky glowed orange and red across the horizon. "It's beautiful," Sarah said. Ethan nodded. "It never gets old." She glanced toward him. "Why did you help me?" The question surprised him. He thought for a moment. "Because someone should have." Sarah looked away. Most people would have said something heroic. Something dramatic. Instead Ethan gave the simplest answer imaginable. And somehow it meant more. Winter arrived. Snow covered the ranch. Christmas decorations appeared throughout the farmhouse. Laughter filled rooms once silent. Sarah found herself smiling more often than not. Then one morning everything changed. A sheriff's wagon rolled onto the property. Sarah noticed it from the kitchen window. Her stomach tightened immediately. Walter stepped down from the wagon. The sight of him sent terror racing through her body. Months of healing seemed to vanish instantly. He stormed toward the house. "There she is." Sarah froze. Walter pointed directly at her. "You're coming home." Before she could respond, Ethan stepped between them. "No," Walter sneered. "Stay out of this." Ethan didn't move. "You don't own her." The tension was immediate. The sheriff watched carefully. Walter turned toward Sarah. "Let's go." For years those words had controlled her. For years she obeyed. This time something was different. Sarah looked at Ethan, then at Martha, then at the ranch workers gathering nearby. People who cared about her. People who believed in her. She stood straighter. "No." Walter blinked. "What?" "I'm not going with you." His face darkened. You don't have a choice. Yes, I do. The words shocked even Sarah. For the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid to say them. Walter stepped forward angrily. The sheriff immediately intervened. That's enough. Walter rounded on him. What are you talking about? The sheriff produced several documents. Medical reports, witness statements, evidence gathered during the past several months. The doctor had documented every injury. The sheriff had investigated every claim. The truth was undeniable. Walter's confidence vanished. Within minutes handcuffs clicked around his wrists. Sarah watched silently. She expected relief. Instead she felt disbelief. For years she had imagined this moment. Yet now that it was happening, it seemed impossible. Walter stared at her with fury. You'll regret this. Sarah met his gaze calmly. No. The wagon carried him away. As it disappeared into the distance, Sarah realized something profound. The fear that had controlled her for years was finally gone. She was free, truly free. That night the ranch celebrated. Nothing extravagant, just dinner together, laughter, stories, warm company. Yet it felt more meaningful than any grand event. Sarah belonged there. Months turned into another year. The seasons changed again. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The friendship between Sarah and Ethan deepened naturally. Neither rushed it, neither forced it. Trust grew slowly, then affection followed. Everyone around them noticed long before they did. One spring afternoon Ethan and Sarah rode horseback through a valley filled with wildflowers. The landscape seemed painted with color. They stopped atop a hill overlooking the ranch. The wind moved gently through the grass. Sarah smiled. I never imagined my life could look like this. Ethan looked at her. Neither did I. She laughed softly. What does that mean? It means the ranch was a lot quieter before you arrived. Their eyes met. Neither looked away. For a moment the entire world seemed to disappear. Only the two of them remained. Sarah felt warmth spread through her chest. Not the nervous fear she once associated with relationships. Something safer. Something stronger. Love. Over the following months their relationship blossomed. They spent evenings talking on the porch. They rode together across the ranch. They laughed more than either thought possible. One evening during a community gathering, Ethan led Sarah toward the hill overlooking the valley. The setting sun painted the horizon gold. Friends and neighbors gathered below. Sarah looked around curiously. What are we doing up here? Ethan smiled. You'll see. Then he reached into his pocket. Her breath caught. Ethan dropped to one knee. The world seemed to stop. Sarah Collins, he said softly, the day I met you, I thought I was helping someone who needed a second chance. Emotion filled his voice. The truth is, you changed my life too. Tears formed in Sarah's eyes. You brought laughter back into this house. He opened a small box. A ring sparkled inside. You reminded me what hope looks like. Sarah covered her mouth. I love you. The tears began flowing freely now. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. He smiled. Will you marry me? For a moment she couldn't speak. She thought about the frightened woman sitting alone in the rain. The woman who believed her story was ending. She thought about the cowboy who stopped. The man who saw her pain when others looked away. The man who gave her kindness when she needed it most. And the man she loved with all her heart. Finally she nodded. Yes. The word emerged through tears. Yes. Cheers erupted from below. Friends and neighbors celebrated. Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger. Sarah laughed and cried at the same time. The future that once seemed impossible now stood before her. A year later they married beneath a clear Wyoming sky. The entire town attended. Martha cried through half the ceremony. Even the ranch hands struggled to hide their emotions. As Sarah walked toward Ethan, she felt overwhelming gratitude. Not because her life had become perfect. No life ever was. But because she had learned something important. One act of kindness can change everything. One person willing to care can alter another person's destiny. Years later visitors often asked about the framed wedding photograph hanging above the fireplace. Sarah would smile whenever she saw it. Because the picture represented far more than a marriage. It represented survival, hope, healing, and the day a cowboy found a broken woman who could barely stand and refused to leave her behind. When Sarah looked back on her journey, she didn't remember the pain as clearly anymore. She remembered the rain, the kindness in Ethan's eyes, the warmth of Martha's kitchen, the freedom of riding across open fields. The moment fear finally lost its hold. Most of all, she remembered being lifted from the ground when she could no longer stand on her own. That moment became the turning point of her life. A reminder that even in humanity's darkest moments, compassion still exists. And sometimes all it takes is one person willing to stop, reach out a hand, and say, you don't have to face this alone. For Sarah Collins, that hand belonged to a cowboy. And because of him, her fate changed forever.